At 7 o'clock, we'll start the meeting with a salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Madam Clerk, please.
Trustee Dudash? Here. Trustee Kringle is absent. Trustee Eno?
Here.
Trustee Falk? Here. Treasurer Shaka?
Here.
Clerk Davis here. Supervisor Lewandowski?
Here. Next is the approval of the June 16th, 2025 meeting minutes. I have a motion by Dudash to approve the minutes. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Falk. Is there any discussion regarding the minutes? See none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Public comments. We're gonna do it a little bit different tonight. If anybody has any comments regarding anything other than, the PFAS issue, we ask that you state your name and address, and we'll take those, comments now. When we get to the PFAS issue, we're gonna let, both parties talk about what they wanna talk about, and then maybe we can take some questions from the audience. So any public comments?
Michelle Brown, Port Huron Township, 3484 Ravenswood Road. I was just wanting to know if soon you can provide an update on the video recordings of the board meetings, where you're at in your pipeline getting that done.
I don't have anything for anybody tonight. Should have by the next meeting.
Okay.
Anyone else? Seeing none, okay, moving on to new agenda items, attorney's report.
Good evening, you should have in front of you my report for activity in the month of June. I don't know if there's anything specific to highlight, reports in there, if you have any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Bob? No. Engineers report.
Mr. Supervisor. I'll give a brief update on current projects. Not a lot's changed since our last meeting. The Howard and 24th Street sidewalk project is just waiting on a contractor. Supposed to be out there this week according to the last communication. So it's all staked, ready to go. Just waiting for them to show up. Bakersfield Pathway, similar, although they've already started with the boardwalk construction and that's completed. They was just waiting for the site to dry out a little bit. We should be getting boots on the ground for the pathway construction any day now. So. Maywood Pump Station, we did make a little traction with EPA on the grant. They did agree to the categorical exclusion we had discussed previously, and we're just working on getting the township staff access to that grant system. Plan is still to bid that out late fall, winter, looking for a spring construction on that project. So, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Do you have any questions for me? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sheriff's report.
Good evening, Sergeant Beakey, here on behalf of Captain Poland, who was not able to make it today. If it would please the board, I can go through these all one by one if you would like. I did review the activity stats that were provided to me, and from a month-to-month basis from May into June, there weren't anything that was any really statistical outliers for any large increases or decreases. Also on the night shift that I'm supervising, there were no major case developments or anything that we're aware of for the month of June as well on the night shifts at least. If the board has any questions specifically about any of it, I'd be happy to entertain.
Any questions? No. Thanks, sir. Fire chief's report.
Good evening. So you have the breakdown of the incidents in front of you. The only two notable incidents we had was the combination commercial residential building in Ravenswood that we talked about last board meeting. The investigation is closed on my end, and it was passed over to the sheriff's office. And then we had a small fire 300 block of an S Street. That was due to a service drop charging the neutral line. So that's about all we had.
All right. Any questions for the chief? All right. Seeing none. Next, we have the EGLE update regarding PFAS investigation in the township.
You guys need to see?
We don't need to sit, because we need to hook up to something.
Turn it on again, Bob.
Like DirecTV.
Everybody else able to see that?
Well, hello, and thanks for coming. I'm Ann Cavalier. I work in the Emerging Pollutants section within the Water Resources Division of the East Side of Lansing.
Kevin, would you
House 8, also with the emerging pollutant section. I did recently did take a job with a different division of EGLE, so I will be going up to the Cadillac office and still working for EGLE, but I accepted a job at the beginning of August. But I've been working on this project since 2018.
When you used to be in remediation.
Yeah, I'm going back to the division I used to work for. Yes. I was used to manage the Fort Gratiot landfill back in the day.
And I mostly work with the municipal wastewater treatment plants on those that have industrial pre-treatment programs, working with them on their source identification for PFAS. So I work very closely with the Port Huron wastewater treatment plant. I cover Southeast Michigan. I do Kalamazoo district and the Gaylord and Cadillac districts as well, but I am based here in Southeast Michigan. So before we talk about Thompson Pond, never really know the general awareness of PFAS. You know, it's kind of in the news a lot lately. It's been in the news a lot in Michigan, probably since the Rockford tannery investigation started in 2017. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, PFAS, it stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a group of chemicals. PFAS isn't just one PFAS, so it stands for the family. They are made up of carbon and fluorine bonds, which is the strongest chemical bond that we have. These are man-made chemicals. They are highly stable. They repel oil, grease, water, dirt, and they were developed in the 1940s, so they have been with us for many decades. And so why are we concerned about them within the past, 10 years? Because we're finding them a lot more, because we're able to test for them at low levels, and we're finding them at very, very low levels. They don't break down easily, and they can bioaccumulate or build up in our bodies if we consume them either by drinking contaminated water, eating contaminated fish. And then we have known that some PFAS can cause certain health effects. And I hope that Dr. Nevin from the health department can go more deeply into that when he talks about it, because we are not toxicologists. We're just normal scientists. And so again, there's a lot of new information that's out there about that. And so there's just a need for more regulatory oversight, both at the state level and at the federal level. So just bringing you back to the 1930s, PFAS was accidentally discovered when Teflon was created in the 1930s as part of the Manhattan Project, or the bomb, for World War II. And so it really wasn't until the 1950s did PFAS enter our consumer products. So, who's all heard of Teflon, right? You've all heard of Scotchgard, right? Wonderful products back in the 50s. And then in the 60s, that firefighting foam, or AFFF, was created, which is really useful when putting out any hydrocarbon fires, so planes, chemical, again, to help save life. And then we move on into the 70s and current day, again, just more widespread use of PFAS, and we're finding it really globally, in the Arctic, Antarctic, and places where, it's traveled many, many miles. And so just so you're aware, PFAS is in our everyday lives. It's in your nonstick coating, your cookware, it's in sealants, it's in your cosmetics, your health and beauty products, household cleaners. If you go to get fast food, it's likely in that wrapper. If there's a coating of PFAS, your pizza boxes, again, widespread use, which is why these chemicals are everywhere. And so here in Michigan, we are one of very few states that actually regulate PFAS. And so on the, left side, we're looking at our drinking water and our groundwater cleanup standards. And so for those major C's, we are regulating 7 compounds. And so again, PFAS is the family of chemicals. What you see here are individual types of PFAS that Michigan regulates. So for today in Thompson Pond, we're mostly focused on our surface water quality values, and we regulate just 5 of the PFAS of the 1,000. And so we're talking about parts per trillion. So very, 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 very tiny levels that we're detecting down that we are concerned about. And so we're mostly going to be talking about PFOS. That's kind of the regulatory driver in a lot of our investigations across the state, because the criteria, 12 parts per trillion, is extremely low compared to the other values that we are regulating for PFAS. All right. Kevin, am I missing anything?
No. Go.
Okay.
I guess an example of a part per trillion is like 3 eyedroppers in an Olympic-sized pool will get you up. That'd be 1 part per trillion.
Thank you.
So just to
I never remember if it's 1 or 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, very, very tiny amounts. All right, so we're going to go over the surface water sampling that we did at Thompson Pond this past April. Emma Reeve is a colleague of ours. She's got the GIS capabilities that Kevin and I don't have, so she created these maps for us. But just to give you some background, so you may remember that back in 2003, a do not eat fish consumption advisory was issued for Thompson Pond for PFOS, or because of PFOS. And so at that time when the fish advisory was issued, our organization, we went out and did surface water. When I say surface water, I'm meaning like creeks, ditches, drains, lakes, rivers, streams, that kind of stuff. Like that's all the stuff that EGLE regulate. So we did 8 locations around the pond, and we found PFAS concentrations from 20 to 330 nanograms per liter, which is the same as parts per trillion, and then PFOA at 25 to 120 nanograms per liter of parts per trillion. So just remember, back in that other slide, 12 parts per trillion. That's what we're comparing our surface water results when we get the PFOS results. We're comparing 20 to 330 to 12. So as you can see, we're over the criteria that we have in Michigan. And so we do know, and Kevin has been very much involved since day one with the work that EGLE is doing regarding the Technicomp facility that's just south of Thompson Pond. And so, you know, we kind of maybe thought that was a potential source of why we're seeing the PFAS and PFOA in the surface water and in Thompson Pond, but they're actually not hydrologically connected. The Technicomp site is in a different watershed, and that water does not flow in to Thompson Pond. But that doesn't mean maybe stuff from Technicomp wasn't transported over here and spread. So it's just still one possibility. Another thing that we look at are biosolids. So I'm not the biosolids expert, but you know, these are the residuals that are left over at a wastewater treatment plant after the pathogens have been removed, and they are highly rich in nitrogen and phosphorus. And so many farmers within St. Clair County have taken biosolids, not just from Fort Huron wastewater treatment plant, but from a number of the local wastewater treatment plants on their fields. And we do know within St. Clair County in the 1980s, there was biosolids that were applied that were heavily contaminated with PFOS due to the paper mills in the area discharging to the Fort Huron wastewater treatment plant in the 80s, and those biosolids were land applied. So that has been an ongoing investigation that Kevin and I have been a part of for the past 6 years. Thompson Pond is kind of, while it's within St. Clair County, it's kind of been a separate piece of that overall investigation. So, getting back to Thompson Pond, back in April we did a more intense sampling effort of our surface water to figure out the extent of where we're finding PFAS. And so you can see that we did 39 sample locations. There are the orange dots there. And we analyzed for 34 PFAS. Now remember, we really only regulate 5, but we like to look at a larger class that we can see what there may be other PFAS that we don't particularly regulate for, maybe can help us with fingerprinting or IDing a potential source. Okay, so first we're going to look at PFOS, and that is really small, so I apologize. So again, we're comparing these results to 12 parts per trillion, and maybe it'll be better. Well, I can't get a cursor on the map here. So here's Thompson Pond, right? We tested the pond, was at 56 parts per trillion. We go further out, and we're seeing kind of this cluster here. We've got 380, 130, 290, 130 parts per trillion. Now again, we're comparing these to 12 parts per trillion. So when you see these levels, that's not great. That shows that something was, there's some sort of source around this area. The further upstream we go, the less we see of PFAS. It's meeting our standards. So that's great. And here you can see, Technicom is down here. So that's PFOS. Kevin, can you hit? So here we're looking at PFOA, and so we're comparing these values to 170 parts per trillion. So the pond was 110 parts per trillion for PFOA. We do have this 1400, which sounds really scary, but Kevin took that sample. Can you talk a little bit about that sample?
Yeah, so that was along this, right on the highway. It was in the ditch along the highway, very little bit of water, stagnant. So we believe that probably was sitting there being able to pick up the PFAS, so probably not a true representation. It's probably similar levels to what's around, just that water was stagnant. So we're not putting much weight into that, just based on the observations and knowing. When we've seen that in the past, we've taken stagnant water, even at the Technicom sites, the levels can just really increase. There's more contact time with the sediment that's in the ditch for it to put more PFAS into the water. So don't put too much in that 1400. It's still there, but it's probably similar levels to what we're seeing around.
Yeah. So while outside of this 1400, we don't have any samples that are above that 170. Again, these are levels that are concerning to us because they are elevated. When we sample, EGLE samples a lot of our water throughout the state as part of our watershed sampling plans, and so we have been sampling for PFAS and PFOA since our first water quality value. Our criteria started in 2011, so we have been sampling for PFAS for a really long time, and it's never non-detect across the state. We do find PFAS in a lot of the places that we look, but it's usually very low levels, like single digits, 2 to 5 parts per trillion. And so, right, when we're seeing a 40, a 19, a 38, to us that means something is going on there. There was some PFAS application at one point in time. Okay, next slide. So next is total PFAS. Now, we don't have criteria for total PFAS. And this is just a summation of the 34 PFAS that we analyzed for. So it's just to kind of give you some context that we're seeing a lot of PFAS in this general area. Now we don't, that's not normal. That's not like background anthropogenic human, cause levels there. So it tells us that something happened at some point, and that's what we've been trying to figure out. Okay. Next slide. So next step. So around Thompson Pond, we've worked with the local health department and then our partners within the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. We look to see who is on residential wells. This happens at all of our investigations across the state where we find PFAS levels at a concerning level. We first look to see who's on residential wells, because could that surface water that have those high levels, could that water be making it down to someone's aquifer that they're then drinking? Because again, as Dr. Nevin will explain, we want to make sure that we're preventing people from drinking contaminated water, eating contaminated fish. So we worked, like I said, with DHHS and local health, and we looked at wells that were below 100 feet deep. A lot of you have wells, if you're on a well, they're over 100 feet deep, which is great. And there's a lot of clay in this area. And so clay is really good because it acts as kind of a barrier for those PFAS molecules from preventing it to entering that aquifer. West side of the state, sandy soils. There's been a lot more people impacted on that side of the state with their wells. So we found 11 homes that their wells were below 100 feet. Right now, 2 people have only given access to them. And so our contractor, AECom, will be sampling on July 24th. And we have been working with Optic, maybe our records are out of date and maybe people are on municipal water and our records just don't indicate that. So we are working to see that as well. And then we will likely do, once we have these results back, and if we do any additional residential well sampling or any additional surface water results, we'll have a town meeting or public meeting at some point in the future.
That's what I add to that. So we've looked at a lot of, why we came to this decision to do 100 foot or less, is we've sampled now definitely over 100 wells from China Township all the way up in the north part of this county. And it's very consistent that most wells seem to be 100 foot or deeper and have a nice gray, dense clay. And we've never detected PFAS in any residential well in the county. So that's been the good news. And that's why we went with this, because, and even there's a couple wells that are like right at 100 or 90 feet or 95 feet that we asked to sample. They're still beneath that clay, so we will get a look again in this area beneath that clay. There's a couple wells, if people let us. But we really were trying to target those shallow ones. And one in particular, McPherson Road, has very shallow wells. I know one person did sign up. They only use their well for irrigation, and they're hooked up for drinking water. But we're still going to sample that irrigation well to see. It's only like a 30-foot or 40-foot well to see if that shallow aquifer has been impacted. So that's why we made the decision we did, based on the historical knowledge we got of the county.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for that. All right, next, I think the last couple of slides, and maybe Dr. Nevin, you can speak to this. But Michigan Department of Health and Human Services did just release their Eat Safe Fish Guide, updated for 2025. And so there are a number of water bodies within St. Clair County, not just Thompson Pond, that do have fish consumption advisories that are being driven by PFOS. I'm sure most of you are familiar with our mercury or PCB fish consumption advisories, but this year DHHS, they lowered the criteria of what would trigger a do not eat fish advisory. It was 300 parts per billion of PFOS in a fish fillet that would trigger a do not eat. They lowered it to 49.5, I think so is what it is. So that is a large magnitude, and so that has just triggered a lot more fish consumption advisories in St. Clair County as well as in other parts of the state. So that is all we have, and we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ann and Kevin. That was excellent. I'm Dr. Nevin. I'm the medical director for the county, and we have Liz, our health officer, here today as well. I just want to thank you both for coming out. I used to work in the military as a public health officer, and I've worked around the country. And I have to say, the technical expertise that we have at EGLE in Michigan is second to none. As those of you that are familiar with my work on the solar regulations up at Fort Gratiot, you'll know that there's no love lost between me and a lot of the leadership at EGLE. I'm not a huge fan of the political leadership at EGLE, but the frontline shoe leather staff at EGLE that we have in this state are fantastic. So thank you both very much. When I first received a round of applause, because if we were in any other adjacent state, you would not be receiving detailed testing data like this. This is really something that's exclusive to EGLE, and we thank you for that. So I want to put this in some context, because you've heard the sampling information. You've heard a little bit about the hydrology and the geology, the soil information, but what are the potential health effects of what they've been sharing here? The broader perspective is that we are very fortunate here in this area because there isn't a lot of industrial activity in our area that would lead to widespread PFAS contamination. If we were adjacent to a military installation or an airport where there was widespread use of these aqueous firefighting foams, which are high in PFAS, that get into the groundwater and that drain over large areas, we would be seeing levels like this routinely. But because there aren't, with one exception, there aren't large industrial sources of PFAS in the thumb and in our county, we've been mostly spared the PFAS contamination that's very common throughout the country. Now, it sounds as though all of the PFAS that we've been detecting, or most of the PFAS that we've been detecting in recent years, has one common source. And it seems increasingly likely that it's related to paper processing in the county. The waxy PFAS-coated papers that have been commonly used in consumer applications like your burger wrappers and so on that are coated with PFAS, which fortunately are no longer in production. So we're no longer exposed to PFAS through common consumer products like that.
Well, PFAS and PFOA are no longer used.
Right, that's true. Some of the other
Those have been
shorter
phased
chains,
out,
right,
but
that's true.
there's still PFAS
Right.
there.
So well, we're getting there. We're recognizing that exposure to any kind of PFAS is bad. But it seems as though during the operation of the Domtar plant over many years, either through discharge into the sewage or the processing and composting of the pulp waste that was left over as garbage from that and composted nearby, it seems as though most of the PFAS contamination in our community is related to that. We can't say for certain, but it seems increasingly likely that that's the common source. And that's not good, right? Because, well, you may be familiar with the fact that the state recently settled with Technicom, and I believe with Domtar. I believe they've arrived at a settlement that covers the immediate costs of cleaning up that site. But what it doesn't deal with is the potential costs of dealing up any broader contamination that may have resulted from that. And unfortunately, at this point, we can't say for certain that was the source of this contamination, right? There was some use of biosolids, which we feel the majority of the PFAS contamination came from discharges, and that ended up in the biosolids that were then transported to fields. But if you go back to the slides just to show the distribution of this, the ultimate, the cause of this contamination, actually maybe put the next one on total PFAS contamination. Yeah. So the ultimate source of this isn't clear, and what we're hoping to get from members of the community with some institutional knowledge who've been here for many years is perhaps some insight into what might have been used, what might have been deposited on this land that might account for this. Now, these are all just theories at the moment. This is just speculation at the moment. But for example, my understanding is that, well, you can see there's some high concentrations along this road here. There's some high concentrations down here. And some of the things we discussed as possible explanations would be, well, what if some PFAS contaminated material was used in the fiber that's used for hydroseeding? You know, when you hydroseed and there's that green substance with pulp so that the seeds stick to the ground. What if some paper pulp-like material, possibly from down here, was used for hydroseeding in this area? That may explain the patterns of contamination we see. What if some PFAS-heavy pulp or fill material was widely used in landscaping applications in the area? That might explain this pattern. The reason we would like to know what might have resulted in this is you see these elevated numbers here. This is only where they've tested so far, right? And we don't know if EGLE continues to test south of here north of here, west of here, in other townships throughout the county, at this point, we can't say for certain how widespread this contamination might be. So we are very interested in your theories, your ideas, any insight that you may have that could explain this pattern. And I'm happy to talk to anyone after this meeting if you have any ideas, or you can contact us at the health department. But now let me step back and talk about the health impacts of this. We're speaking about surface water contamination, right? So this is not water you are normally drinking. Hopefully your pets and so on are not drinking this water, but we should not be consuming or ingesting this water. And I would think in the ordinary course of our day, lawn care, sports activities in the area where you might have incidental contact with this surface water. I don't believe this is a credible acute or chronic health threat. Sporadic, rare contact with these surface waters that doesn't involve ingestion likely does not pose a significant health risk. Now that being said, if this surface water were to find its way down through the clay and into the water table, and it were to contaminate the groundwater, such that these same concentrations were to be found in groundwater, that would absolutely be a serious concern. Because in epidemiological studies that have been done in recent decades, levels of PFAS, roughly this order of concentration, beginning in the double digits and extending up into the triple digits, this is consistently associated with an increased risk of chronic health effects, not acute health effects, chronic health effects. So things like certain cancers of the reproductive tract, the testes, the kidneys, liver disease, risk of immunological dysfunction and risk of metabolic dysfunction, problems with cholesterol, and so on. And this is just the beginning. As we study this more, I think we're going to learn more and more chronic health problems associated with PFAS contaminations in drinking water at roughly these levels. Now, again, as EGLE staff mentioned, we are reasonably confident, based on testing history in the area, that surface water contamination poses, we think, a relatively low or hopefully even trivial risk of groundwater contamination because of the clay-rich nature of the soils here. We all know, we go outside after a rainstorm and the water just sits there. If we were in a sandy area where you had sandy, well-drained soils, we wouldn't be dealing with the flooding and the overflowing ditches that we have here. It's if you've ever been frustrated by the fact that water backs up and our drains overflow, in this one case, it's a good thing, because it may be protecting our groundwater from this contamination. But until we get the well water tests, obviously we can't say for certain. But I think it was the unanimous opinion of the EGLE staff when we were on our phone call several weeks ago, and the staff at the health department, that the likelihood of this affecting groundwater was so low that we felt confident in not acting. And if any of us felt differently, if we felt that anyone's groundwater could be significantly affected by this, we would have acted right away, and we would have recommended that you switch to bottled water or something. So I'm very optimistic that the testing is going to return reassuring. But until we complete it, obviously we can't know for sure. And did you want to correct or
No, I
comment
just
on
want to
anything?
add,
No.
the criteria can be really confusing. And so when we do test residential wells, we are then using the criteria on the left. So the drinking water, and like if you're on municipal water and what comes out of, before it goes in the distribution center, that water and then the water in your aquifer in your well, it's the same criteria. And so when we do residential wells, we are going to be comparing those results to the criteria on the left there. So, you can see that the surface water criteria for PFOS is 12, but in your aquifer we compare it to a 16, and then PFOA we compare it to 8 versus 170 parts per trillion. And I think that is hard to wrap your head around of like, why is it different? And again, I'm not a toxicologist and I don't know. There are reasonable answers to those, and we can point you to the staff that developed that criteria. criteria, but just so that you're aware.
No. So if an individual is exposed to middle to high double-digit levels of these substances in their drinking water over several years or several decades, the studies now are reasonably clear that they are at slightly but significantly increased risk of the various health outcomes that I described. And let me just put some more context into this. So I mentioned I was in the military. I help a lot of veterans out with their disability claims. And I'm often contacted by veterans who can demonstrate that they were exposed to PFAS as part of their military service. So for example, if they're dealing with aqueous firefighting foams and so on. And we can often find a PFAS measurement in their medical records, and I can correlate that with health outcomes. If you're exposed to levels above this, significantly above this, and you were a veteran, you would probably be able to claim disability for any of these conditions that develop, meaning that the evidence would be in favor of that having caused the condition in question. So again, certain cancers, certain liver problems, certain immunologic problems, problems with cholesterol and metabolism, and so on. In any given case, can we say for certain whether a particular health outcome is the result of PFAS exposure? We can't say for certain, but we can say more likely than not. It's reasonable to assume that. So in studies of people around the country, PFAS in the blood, in the serum, is ubiquitous. If we were to test everyone's blood here, even without this potential contamination, we would all have levels of PFAS in the low parts per billion, I think, is reasonable. And in general, as you spend more time on this earth, your levels rise because this stuff bioaccumulates. It tends not to be excreted very quickly. And beyond a certain point, the high double digits of these substances is when you start to see strong epidemiological evidence of correlation. And the studies that have been done on people with high levels, these are folks that are living predominantly in areas with contaminated groundwater, largely from the nearby use of aqueous firefighting foam. So folks who are down river of military installations and airports and so on, and occasionally downriver groundwater of areas with industrial contamination. So if we complete the well water testing here and we find that groundwater is not contaminated, then that takes away any immediate urgent cause for concern or action. But it doesn't address the question of where this is coming from and how we might potentially clean this up so it doesn't pose a potential issue or problem into the future. So unfortunately, at this point, I think with this data, we know enough to begin to ask questions, but we have more questions than we do answers at this point. So we are very much hoping that the residents of the township can help educate us and guide us into what might be causing this. And if you have any other comments, perhaps we can open it up to questions. Would that be appropriate now?
So,
Yeah, we'll go ahead.
So Lisa Fisher, if you do have questions about the eSafe Fish Guy, she's a toxicologist who's assigned to St. Clair County, and so she's the person to talk to about fish consumption. And as Kevin said, he's abandoning me, and so you can reach out to him. I mean, he's still going to be with EGLE, so I will be phoning a friend very often. But you can reach out to me, and I have cards as well. I have thousands of these, so feel free to take them. But you can reach out to me, and yeah, so we'll take questions.
First, I'd like to ask the board, do they have any questions?
No.
Very well
Thank you for coming out.
Well, the praise is due to EGLE. Without EGLE, we wouldn't even know about this. So,
If someone wanted to get their well tested, do they go through the health department or is it a different type of water test?
So are you asking, like, we have not identified their well to be tested, but they just want to, yep, so, let me unconnect and reconnect real quick. So, we do have the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. Okay, I'm ready. And so this agency or this group was actually, oh, come on, why aren't you showing? Now you can all see my picture in Alaska.
It's just a standard test.
I don't know why it's not showing. Yeah. Oh, no. Well, shoot. Gotta close my plans to share this.
We're gonna show them the list and shows all the different,
Yeah.
the labs that do it and the prices.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shoot. Well, people can contact me, and so right, the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team started in 2017 under Governor Snyder, and it's essentially the umbrella agency that coordinates PFAS investigations. So, EGLE, DHHS, LARA, MDARD, DNR, MDOT, everybody is all, we all work together when we do PFAS investigations across the state. So they do have a fabulous website. I'm not saying something for government, but they have a page where if you are interested in getting your residential well tested, there are resources available. It gives you labs, contact information, cost. If you are interested in getting your well tested.
If there's anything that you can get posted on our website.
Yep.
Just send it
You can
to me.
certainly do
Okay,
that.
yeah.
Yep.
I think the cheapest right now, the one that I saw listed last time I looked, about $250 for the test. And they test for, you don't get 39, I think you get, I think our drinking water is in the low 30s, upper 20 of PFAS compounds we look for. It's a little different than the surface water, groundwater test.
And to clarify, that the areas that you want to test to obtain the most information useful to your investigation, you've already reached out to folks at those locations.
Yeah, we focus on Port Huron Township, any well less than 100, a portion of Clyde, and a little port with another township too. Just Clyde. So just this area where we have the surface water data and look for wells that are less than 100 foot or less.
So you would have received a letter in the mail, and so I know our contractor, they're going out on the 24th, and so they will knock on people's doors if they didn't receive a response back, just, hopefully catch someone at home.
Yeah, they bring extra bottles with them, so those 11 will be knocked on at least, even if they didn't sign up, or the 9, there's 2 sign-ups, so the 9 other ones would be knocked on, and make sure they truly, some people dismiss it.
You have like a door hanger.
Yeah, and they will leave a door hanger too, because we'll never, if somebody comes back a month later, if their address was targeted, we will always sample them, even if it's a month later, and they said, oh, they just lost the paperwork and they weren't home when they came by, we'll still honor that and go out there and have our contractor test it.
Anyone else on the board have any questions?
Well, we still have in the township.
I don't know the total. We're looking into figuring out which homes may have wells, and fortunately, most of these homes that are on wells, there's municipal water available.
$60,000.
So I think we're happy to entertain questions from the audience now, if that would be appropriate.
You had a question, sir?
I was just wondering, if you have a well that's over 100 feet, you don't really need to worry about testing it, or?
That was found so far in this county. Like I said, we're hopefully gonna get a couple of those people that were right below 100 or at 100 that are beneath that clay. So we can see if we saw something in this area on those wells, that would change the whole investigation, and then we'd offer up a lot more sampling to the area if we saw that.
The guy in the orange back there.
Yeah, Paul Dombrowski, 3333 Berkshire Street. We're on a well. City water or municipal water is available. It's like $60,000 to have it to run down there. So, like well depth, I'm probably pretty close to what you guys are looking for. If you guys need wells to test, we're open. So
You said you'd be for that, because we would have targeted you if you were 100, so you must be more than 100.
it's probably just over that. But I mean, if you guys only have 2 people that are
Okay.
willing.
Wilma McPherson on McPherson Drive. We're one that's getting our well tested.
Okay.
But I do have a question. for you.
Yes.
Since we had to have a permit to put the well in, wouldn't the county have a record of those wells that were put in with permits?
So I believe we do have records of the well locations. Our health officer, Liz King, is here, and we did discuss this. I do believe our records go back, and we should have a census of wells in the area. Yes. Liz, am I correct on that?
That's correct, but I think just like the township, some of it has been replaced with municipal water, and they just don't keep up with the where it is now. And I think we were checking with the
We have both.
Yeah. So we're unsure if that well is still in use or not there. And I think Steve Demick was talking with the township and EGLE as well. So everybody's kind of coordinating that together.
Yeah, we've been talking with Steve ever since, not just Thompson Pond, but ever since the county PFAS investigation within St. Clair County. We've talked to Steve, we've talked to the Drain Commission, we've talked to the Road Commission, and so our local officials have been extremely helpful over the past 6-some years as we've done this investigation. So we worked with Steve. We said this is what we have in terms of our files for the wells. Not always the best at EGLE. What do you guys have? And so we supplemented and then talked to Bob and trying to fill in those data gaps.
Thank you.
Could I ask, does anyone here have any ideas what could be causing this?
That's a loaded question.
Road construction?
No question, I have an idea. Steve Webster, 2195 Parker. They pounded on that highway for over a year, okay? And I'm just right on, 500 feet from it.
On the north side.
On the north side.
So
Now,
here.
when they put my well in, they told me, Webster told me that the clay stops there and turns to sand. It's all swamp sand, okay? Now, that's not, I'm down 105 feet, okay? That's what I've been told. Now another thing is the composting. Does the composting carry the black dirt out to the neighborhoods and does do it or no?
Well, this is what we'd like to know.
Well, there's been a lot of huge piles of dirt in the neighborhood and moved over the years.
Oh, there have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw some on
There's
aerial
been some
photographs.
construction on Huron when I was a kid, digging and transporting dirt in and out.
We did see that there's
That pond was filled back in now. It was dug out, it was all sand. Now it got filled back in.
40th Street.
On Huron, that's where Hop Stream starts. No, I'm just wondering if any contaminants were brought in over on Range Road that was all filled in. That was 4 feet deep. Along the pier was wood chips.
So
South of the pier road, past Range, that was filled in. I watched them fill it in with dump truck piles, one after another.
So you're saying in this area, there's widespread use of a common fill material at some point? Is that
Yeah.
right? And when was that? What year was that?
Through my life, I grew up on that road. I've seen it happen. I've
Was
seen
it in
big
the-
piles of dirt.
Was it in the 80s or the 90s?
I know looking at some old aerials of your area that
I'm
probably
not really
there's
gonna
power
start
lines.
stomping on people's property, telling on people, but I've seen piles of dirt. It wasn't particularly on my road, but going down to different areas like Range and the pier maybe.
Because there's a
Just
power,
west of the pier.
there's a power, I
South
think there's
of
power lines going through that area, there's easements, there's some, like
The
gas.
power
or
lines go through my
We saw
property.
some, I think we looked at a lot of
Yeah,
historic
there's a-
aerials, and there was some tiles in that area
Yeah.
that looked kind of strange, that were in that easement sections.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still there.
No.
Just some other theories that we have thought about that we kind of, we don't think is true is, we also thinking about, the Diamond Tower factory itself is the getting up into the air atmospheric deposition. But we, based on one of the experts I work with, they don't feel that these levels could be caused by atmospheric deposition. And this area is sitting west of the factory, so you need an easterly wind from Canada to blow that. Easterly wind is one of the most rare winds in Michigan. So mostly it's a westerly, southerly, northerly dominated wind. So we don't think it's air deposition, but like we said, it's something that's gotta be, I think it's even more, even though Technicomp's right there, and people could go get compost from them over the years, it would have to be a lot of people doing it. It wouldn't just be a couple neighbors doing it. So this is, we're thinking it's something more, that a developer did, or something more bigger in the area than just one. It's just not from one factory or from one business.
Listen, they built that highway, they pounded for 3 years. They built that hill there. Is that dirt off the inspector?
Well, basically what we're seeing is the levels when it travels under the highway really don't get that much. Over on Partridge, they're almost equal to underneath. So we have talked to MDOT about that intersection being rebuilt. We thought maybe they took, to do the landscaping of that, maybe they brought Technicomp compost and landscaped the intersection. MDOT unfortunately was unable to find any records on where that came from, but based on what the water's telling us, 130, it goes under there, it's still 130, and then it drops even more to 56. If there was something here.
They changed the level of this drain when they went under the highway. They caused us all to back up. They changed the level 2 feet. The water's up 2 feet in that neighborhood. Okay.
But if it was something with the highway though, this number should get higher because as this water flows in the contaminated area. Now also this water we know connects underneath the highway here. It doesn't show it, but that's why we think we're getting levels down here. Is because we've seen maps, drain maps, and there is a drain connecting this neighborhood that does flow south under the highway.
The drain went from the ditch on this side of along the Howard Road. There was a ditch on each side of the drain. They eliminated the drain on the highway side. The ditch was completely taken out because the hill runs right down to the edge of the neighborhood there.
It's the hard thing about PFAS and our investigations is it's not like last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. This is like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, like what was happening in this area. And, that's, again, why we talk to the public, because if you've lived here, you've grown up here, you've seen things, we are just going off of aerial maps to try to see how the land has changed.
And that Thompson Pond, that's a burrow pit, so that was mined for the sand to build the highway back in the day. So that's not a natural water body that was dug out to mine the sand. Like you see a lot of those along the highway, those were burrow pits that were mined for sand for the base of the highway.
And so were they filled in with something?
So they pulled. I have a question over here. Chris Garnoff, some P76 Compo. We'll try to talk over here. Question for the guy with the shallow well. If he's watering his garden, he's not drinking, he's drinking city water, what's the chances of if it's contaminated, getting into his produce that he's producing, feeding himself, his family, and others? Is that a fact?
So the question is, if someone's using groundwater, well water.
Yeah, short, shallow well, let's say it's 60 feet, contaminated.
And they're watering their produce. Absolutely, you would expect. So PFAS would bioaccumulate in vegetables and fish, in foods that we eat. Now, of course, in that case, if they are drawing water from a source that they also use to drink from, then the water consumption from the well would also be a health concern.
Now, the other thing is the cost of testing for wells. I guess since we're on city water or whatever, that testing's all taken care of. The guy that has to pay for his own well has to pay for his testing, which I think is shitty because he pays taxes just like everybody else, but he doesn't pay a water bill. So I guess that's why you have to pay for your testing.
I'm an owner of 2 wells at my cabin at my home, and as an owner, you're responsible truly for the water. And
okay, but the test you guys are drawing from these people you're knocking on their doors, is that free?
Yes.
Then sign him up.
I agree.
There's more than just me.
We have limited budget in Michigan, and we have to use risk-based to look. We can't look at everybody. There's very knowledge in Michigan.
It seems like you're having a hard time finding people to test,
Exactly.
though.
He wants his tested. I say you do. I don't care about your budget.
I do. Amazon carries them, but it's $300, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what we were told. It started at 3 and went up, and every person we call passes the buck. We call
Right, but
health
you're all concerned
department.
about our health.
And no
that's
matter-
my problem with the cost, and everybody wants you to pay, but you're concerned about our health, but don't want to give us nothing for free. Except
Well, we've
this
looked at hundreds of wells in the county.
Right, but I'm just
Well,
saying,
I'm
well
not
testing's
blaming.
not free, and I'm disappointed.
Just every time we reach out and call,
Mhm.
it's like a shrug. I don't know, talk to this person, you call that person, I don't know, call that person.
Who are you speaking with
We
exactly?
called the health department,
Yeah, well, my neighbors were here together. We've even reached out to your company to seek, at one time you guys did offer testing, I think, at a either reduced or free rate, but now it's like, I don't know, how much was the test?
600.
600. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess if we have to, we have to, but it's kind of.
So I suppose the broader context is if EGLE performs a targeted survey of representative wells in the area, I think we can be reasonably certain, and if the testing returns negative, then we can be reasonably certain that wells in between the tested sites and in the general geologic area are also free of contamination. We can't be 100% sure, but we can be very close to 100% sure. The broader concern I have with the context of what's going on is the settlement that I discussed. And if you're not familiar with this, I encourage you to search for this. So in other communities that have been affected by PFAS contamination, once the culprit is identified, then that culprit is generally held responsible for the costs that we're discussing. If there's an industrial polluter, that industrial polluter can be sued, taken to court.
like a reimbursement, and if we find out that the reason our pets are getting tumors and
Yes,
kidney
if there's-
failure and
if
liver
there is-
failure, then that's all gonna.
So in other similar contexts, this has happened, right? Where there's been an industrial polluter identified, and they are held responsible for the costs of testing, some degree of punitive damages, some degree of pain and suffering, and if it's necessary to abandon well water because of the contamination and move to municipal water, then in some cases they've paid for the costs of that. Now, here in St. Clair County, my understanding is the state attorney general has already reached a binding consent agreement or settlement with Domtar that only covers the costs of the immediate cleanup of the composting site and the paper facility. And
Not the paper facility itself, just the compost.
Oh, just the compost facility. But what upsets me very much about this is that the state's attorney general knew, as they were negotiating this settlement, that EGLE was expanding their investigation of this contamination from the pond to this area. And I believe that they knew or ought to have known that one potential suspect as to the cause of this was the facility. So I'm a little surprised by that, because my understanding is the settlement is final.
It is. I was part of the mediation I was in the meeting and stuff. The Technicomp, their business, they don't have to keep records of where this stuff went. There is no records. There's no way of going back and finding out where they went. So we were never going after them for that because there's no records for that to go after them for. So we settled. There's over 75,000 cubic yards of highly contaminated compost because they took what at the time Domtar called it, they got an inert designation. They said their paper waste was inert. It was safe to be used for this purpose back in 99. So they started sending it to Technicomp. They started mixing it in. Technicomp wasn't getting rid of their compost fast enough, so that's why they had so much of it on there. Then we found out in about 2019 that this stuff contained this high levels. We told them to stop selling. We told Domtar their inert designation is no longer good. And then we went into and litigated, got a settlement. They're going to be taking all this compost. It's going over to a hazardous landfill in Canada. There was nobody wanted to accept this. Your own landfill here in the county, it's a closed county. You guys only have one landfill. They are having PFAS issues, so they didn't want to deal with having all this contaminated soil and compost come to them. So it's going to Canada. They're also going to be investigating the ditches around Technicomp. They're not going to clean them up, but they are going to investigate them, and they are giving the state $300,000 to do future remediation of the site. But we did test, there was only 5 wells around Technicomp. We did test those residential and commercial wells. Didn't find any PFAS in them. So again, this is a surface water issue at Technicomp, but getting that 75,000 cubic yards off is huge. Every time it rains in this county, snow melts, that is being flushed into that drain that heads south and then east out to Lake St. Clair. So that's why none of that water from that Star Technicomp site heads north. Everything from Technicomp heads south and east. So that is the story at Technicomp. It was a long, drawn-out
it is true that that's better than nothing. But from my perspective at the health department, it would have been nice if we could have excluded Domtar as the cause of this contamination before the settlement was reached. And at this point, I don't think we can conclude that. Now, we're not saying it was Domtar. We don't know. But they have been responsible for a lot of PFAS contamination in the community, and it's not unreasonable to question whether it might be the source of this. We just don't know yet. But unfortunately, we won't be able to hold them responsible if they are.
Is there a risk of them firing that mill back up?
I've heard the mill is going to be reopened, but I would be very surprised if they engage in the manufacturing of contaminated paper products. I would be very surprised.
I heard it's for this stuff you use in fast food. I believe there's a need for that,
So
right?
am I correct
Specialty
that
papers is all I've heard.
Yeah. The fast food wrappers that are being produced now in specialty paper companies, my understanding is that contamination is not a concern with that anymore.
Well, they're using short chain PFAS.
Short chain
now,
PFAS, okay.
which we don't know. They claim it doesn't last our body as long, and that's, but they've just switched to different, shorter, what they consider safer compounds. It's still PFAS in your wrapper, your pizza boxes, heavily in cosmetics. They're doing studies in California just to see the input from cosmetics every day. It's on contact lenses, it's on your dental floss, it's in your toilet paper, it's everywhere. And there are states, and Michigan has started, Michigan hasn't passed anything, but states like Minnesota, California are banning it in uses because every time you wash your hand, it's in detergents and fabric softeners, it's in everything. And that's why it's hard to find clean surface water in Michigan because it's atmospheric, and that's why Ann was saying it's not surprising just to find a couple parts per trillion, even out in the middle of state land in northern Michigan. You find it, unfortunately.
Yeah. But of course, that being said, when you have a large industrial source of PFAS, and there's a potential for surface water, groundwater contamination, the existing ubiquitous problems with PFAS contamination are that much worse.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Shane Partridge Road, get back on what Steve was talking about with the expressway. Have you guys done a core sample of the dirt to see if there's anything? Because there was, like you said, there was tons of shit brought in when they were bringing that expressway in and brought that way up high. And have you done any dirt samples?
No, we have not, because I guess one day there could be a possibility, but right now in Michigan, we have no criteria for the soil, so we can test for it, we got nothing to compare it to, we don't know if it's safe or not safe.
There's pounding for over years, putting that, I just couldn't sleep around there.
Yeah.
But like I said, if they brought a lot of stuff into that area, that interchange,
What about up here?
you would see a big increase underneath that highway. That water that would be picking it up. It was a theory at first, but these samples
It's the
don't
same
bear
on
out
both
that
sides
high.
of the highway, is what you're trying to say. On that drain.
So this, if
If
they
you
brought,
drain down farther, that they buried,
but if they brought a bunch of stuff in here, and this is contaminated, this number should be higher. And this number even should be higher because it's picking up PFAS.
So you're saying
it's higher over
here,
the
Range Road, where's Range at here?
Yeah, Range, I
Range
believe
is right here. Okay, so it's right here where they dug and filled. Where they dug and filled in that box. They dug out tons of dirt, hauled out the sand, and they made ponds.
Now those numbers, is there anybody that checked those numbers before the
They
expressway?
filled it in with contaminated dirt. I bet you go dig over there and find it. I know right where it's at.
Well, before the expressway, was there any numbers like this we looked at before? Because it does seem like that's where it comes from. All that.
Between Healing and Range, they dug huge holes. They dug all that sand out of there from trucking for years while I was a little kid. Bulldozers were back there, way down in, they made ponds, they swam in the ponds. And then they filled them back in, they're not there no more. Okay, enough will stop.
No, this is very helpful.
Well, you
This is
asked me
precisely
about
the
this
type
stuff.
of
I'm just
insight
giving you
that we're
what
looking
I've
for.
seen.
I'm sorry, we're spending a lot of time, but there may be.
Joy Robbins, Partridge Road. I've lived there 30 years. But the people across the street from us who have passed away now, but were friends, very good friends of ours and all. When they built their house, she said they would have to park their cars on Partridge Road because it was just a swamp. They had to bring in dirt to raise that farm. So like our neighbor is raised higher than us even, so all that had to be brought in. So we could be talking 40 years ago that, because she said you couldn't even drive your car down the road.
Yeah, that's something we're interested in. It's something that's why that big.
Could we clarify, where are you
That would be
referring to?
Partridge.
She's like right near the 130. Partridge
Okay.
Road is this little, like this 290,
It was
130.
the fish farm.
So so this was a very swampy area and there was a lot of fill.
I lived there since I was 10 years old on that.
Was there a similar problem with swampiness in the more northern areas, such as along water?
Solid woods.
It was woods, it wasn't a swamp, it was woods?
There are, where the 3.2 is on Bryce Drain, which is right around McPherson Drive. North end of McPherson Drive, where they put in a subdivision, was a swamp. I used to catch tadpoles back in there.
Okay.
And they filled it in, which I just kind of laughed and go, hope your power never goes out, because your basements are flooded.
Can you
Yeah,
put
we
the
had-
total PFAS?
Yeah,
on?
we have had a conversation with the road commission, asking, because as we've talked about how we've
The
done.
351.
Yeah, the aerials, right, the subdivisions weren't always there,
Yeah.
right? And so that's one thing we have,
I've been
looked
there
at.
for 50, almost 55 years.
Right, right, so when stuff was cleared, filled,
Yeah.
you know, what was it filled with?
Where did it come from?
Where did it come
Exactly.
from?
Where did it
Yeah.
come from?
And
So that's something we're looking
what
at.
years was this filling taking place?
So with the
10 years
70s,
ago?
10 years ago up north? Is that right?
It's Spruce,
Spruce-
whatever the
Spruce Meadows.
Spruce Meadows off of Atkins.
So this is a fairly new development.
Fairly new development.
So in the 2010s, there was a significant amount of fill deposited in this area.
And then also when Stony Brook was put in back in the 70s.
And where's that?
That's off Westwater.
Before.
Oh, okay, so
between,
around here,
Range Road, east of
right
Range
where
Road.
these numbers are. So are we correct in assuming that everywhere you see elevations, there's potentially the widespread use of fill
Yeah.
over the last 10, 20 years?
Oh, I'd go back even further.
30, 40
40, 50
Yeah, I would
years.
say more, 40 years.
And does anyone know where the fill came from?
Long Red River.
Does anyone know what the fill looked like? What was it pulp? Was it sand? Was
Who
it
bought the fill?
compost? Does anyone know? Are there any piles of the fill that anyone has seen or that remain?
Well, I remember they digging sand off the Black River and putting it over there out at Wadums. That's what I remember.
So-
Spolsky was doing it, he got stopped, he took that Wadums Hill all the way down to the river there. And I don't know if
And you think that could have been?
his equipment was over on Healing Road too, because he was one digging over there. On Healing.
Does this make sense?
We played with this bulldozer when I was like 11 years old.
I mean,
Got
something
caught.
large scale that filling in would correlate to something seen, something like this for sure. But it would be from a source, like I said, was it mixed with that, like, it has to, just going out to, land that hasn't been developed and mining sand from it, probably could be a source, it's gonna be somewhere, oh yeah, to deal, or I guess a mix with Damatar mixture together.
Is there a way to test the fill to see if it has contaminated pulp in it?
If there's that, like, piles somewhere, you could be, PFAS can be tested in sediment.
But is it possible to test the soils to identify a characteristic
You get the
trace
same, you get the same
nature of
compounds.
pulp?
You
Yeah,
just
that-
test, you do
You do the fingerprinting, we can do what's called DIPAPs. DIPAPs are another group of the PFAS family that we can look for, that we did look for in the Partridge area and didn't find DIPAPs in the sediment. We did sample in these circles right here that have an extra black around it, we did extra. We looked even further to try to find fingerprinting, and we didn't find any DIPAPs, but it still doesn't mean it wasn't paper industry. If paper industry used it didn't use it, so our expert that we go to a lot said that just because you didn't find it doesn't mean that you say it's not paper, but we did do that extra test in those areas. unfortunately didn't find the die caps, but we did look for them. So there is different things you can do for fingerprinting to help.
You know, it's only been about 2 or 3 years ago that on the Pier Road, just past Range, they dug a great big borrow pit, took all kinds of dirt out of that, vacant lots over there. And what they filled it in, I have no idea, but they got tons and tons of dirt.
They took dirt out and they replaced it with fill. In
this area
here.
Huh? It's a
It's
pond?
still wet.
There's a pond back there?
Range in the pier, they took the dirt out
This is
and ran
Range.
it across the road. Behind,
That's,
Oh, no.
Allen.
Is this
That's
Range?
Allen. That's Range.
That's Range. So in this area here.
Yeah. The Pier Road between Range and, Allen Road.
yeah, he's where he's pointing.
So they
Great big borrow pit.
they took clay and dirt and they
Took
filled
mostly
it
sand and topsoil out of it.
with, in the last 5 years.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure.
and they put it across the road. They dumped it across the pier road and raised that up. They took it from that big pit and put it across the road. Right on the pier road.
Well, I would say nothing that's been
They
said
did it
here
for
today is
about
inconsistent
6
with our
months.
leading theory. Would you agree?
No, it's widespread.
No, you're talking about the detention pond on the Stocks Creek.
The detention pond?
We took out like 25,000 yards of clay and stockpiled it, and then, but that was all, I mean, no fill.
That's all
Yeah,
sand.
and when you're talking about fill, a lot of people, you know, they always ask for clean fill. It's not so much the pulp and things like that. They want sand or clay, something without concrete in it to raise their yards, or road commission's got specific standards that they're not going to go get pulp and put it on the road because the road's going to sink as it decays. So a lot of the fill you don't have to worry about. It's clean, decent dirt.
So at this point, we don't have definitive eyewitness testimony to fill from pulp being used. No one can say, I know it was pulp. Okay, right. But we can't rule it out at this point.
I did get dirt from Fort Gratiot, you know. I did get dirt from Fort Gratiot, trucked it in my pickup in my van, but that was back.
Was that from
in
the township?
From the,
So that was probably before they were mixing it with the, because it was 99 when they got the dirt
yeah,
designation.
I'd already got the dirt out of there.
So that's a good thing. They weren't mixing
Well,
it.
and a lot of that, there's some spots where what they were doing was taking leaves and mixing it in with the dirt. So it wasn't pulp, it was refuge from tree guys. So a lot of that was good, rich dirt without the pulp from the paper companies.
Would anybody have like a relative or friend that worked for Downtown that we could contact? I know that used to work there, that worked there for a lot of years, that maybe could help us at least ask some questions about, they know something that, and they were giving away paperweights to these construction companies back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Because it's most likely probably happened then. I mean, not to say it can't happen just 10 years ago, but relative regulations and EGLE didn't exist, and there was a lot of things being done that just weren't regulated.
So you're thinking that the time that whatever contaminated material is at issue here was deposited from the 90s through 2010?
No, before that. No, I would say 60s, 70s,
Oh, really?
80s, 90s, yeah.
Okay,
Because
all right.
then the regulations, not to say people are still doing illegal stuff, you know, have regulations. It's just harder, you know, people are more conscious and calling and be like, hey, I see this is going on.
Right, and it's because we know from Domtar the years they were using PFOS.
Oh, you do, okay.
Yes.
I see.
And so,
And there's switching more people, okay?
yes, so we have, that's why we're not saying 5-10 years ago, that's why we're saying 40 years ago, you know, and
Have you investigated where maybe the county, road commissioner, drain commissioner, municipalities have been purchasing their fill dirt from?
No, not yet. And that's a very good idea. We had entertained the idea, as I mentioned, perhaps contaminated hydroseeding material
Yeah.
used by
'Cause
road
you could go
commission or
back.
construction. Yes, we could do that. So the pattern of contamination is such that we saw these hotspots along certain roads, right? And that led us to entertain the idea that it might be something road construction or maintenance related. But there are other potential explanations for this,
Yeah,
other
I
than.
mean, just at this, I mean, just to have 84 at the beginning of the waterway, like right away.
Yeah.
I mean, the contamination has to be
Here.
all over the area.
That's
too.
it.
At the beginning of that waterway, it's already 84, you know? And only increasing as it goes over that, and then actually decreasing a bit too, you see. You know, you go from 84 up to 351, but then back down to 271. So, you know, maybe that's, as it maybe is not as contaminated, it's getting some dilution as you go travel far, but that is very concerning that right away in that water body, you know, so you have to have some contamination all the way up at the beginning.
This is more, the pattern that we've seen is more consistent with the widespread use of fill material to address swampy, wet conditions.
I would say just an application.
Yeah, an application.
A widespread application.
Yeah, we're not saying like we're just saying
Okay.
a widespread application.
Yeah, it's just not one business on the road,
Right.
it's not just one car
One
fire, that was
person.
what, a truck, you know, a tanker truck that they triple up on the highway, because even we started, when we first started testing, looking at that, we don't, now that we see this, that's not the case.
There were some comments in the back.
Hi, Sarah Summerall, 2318 Huron. I have a question for this year. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank you for being willing to share your water for the testing results. Going back to the well testing, do I understand correctly that we have 2 wells that we're going to be testing this week? Can you let us know when we will be able to receive results? And 2 wells is not a lot of data to speak on behalf of this entire area. So at what point will you guys, if those other 9 don't come forward, when will you guys, I guess, make a call one way or the other? Are you guys gonna reach out to some new people, or what will that look like before we know whether or not we're clean bill versus it's concerning?
Like, yeah, we'll see what we get for these results, see how many people we get to sign up, if we can get a mixture of the shallow and some of those 90 that start beneath the clay. If not, we'll have to meet again with our team, with the Department of Health and Human Services, Health Department, and come up with a game plan, like I said, to make sure that that's the most important thing, that people aren't ingesting PFAS.
Results take.
It does take a little bit longer, 2 weeks after, usually about 2-3 weeks after the well is tested. The state lab we get the results.
And you would get, if the well is tested, you'll get communicated with the Department of Health and Human Services.
A phone call first, and then eventually a letter stating one way or the other you had it or you don't have it, but the phone call comes first from the Department of Health and Human Services reaches out for those tests. We test, they are the ones that communicate out the results.
Right, and then based on those results, we expand testing, knock on doors.
Or offer filters if that's determined that filters are needed, that are provided free from the Department of Health and Human Services, to hire a plumber and get all that done.
And so again, we're looking at wells below 100 feet. So,
Less than 100.
sorry, yes, less than 100 feet. So, again, if you have a well that's 130 feet deep, it's safe to, it's our assumption and safe to say that if you don't see it, in a shallow, it's not likely going to be in the deeper part of that. So that's why we did that targeted assessment of looking at the wells, people who had wells that were shallow.
Carol?
The actual decree, if you guys are interested, is posted on the community hub page. It's a lot of documentations on there if you're interested to read it. But from what I understand, Dana Nessel took out the ability to have ditches dredged out and cleaned, if I am correct. And so, so what and I've talked to Bob about it too, I don't know what corporate counsel's doing about this. We've known about this for a year. If he's been following the Attorney General's lawsuit, and if not, why? Because if this is going to be a devastation cleanup for our township, we can't afford this. So just like if this gentleman here his well is contaminated, took into municipal water,
that'll devastate him financially, and that's just one person. So I'd like to know what our corporate counsel is gonna do to take and be proactive to protect us.
So the frustration you hear, I share. When we learned of EGLE's testing and these results, excuse me, that point to a widespread disseminated contamination, possibly and maybe even likely from some use of contaminated material. The Attorney General's office in Michigan knew or ought to have known of these results, pointing to at least the possibility of broader impact beyond Technicomp's borders at the time that the consent decree was being negotiated. If this ends up being linked to that facility, we were thrown under the bus.
The other thing I want to bring up.
We did have to be conceded the cleanup of the ditches because they were saying that the costs had gotten so out of hand for disposal that they weren't going to be able to dispose of it. We were concerned that in your designation, if we went to court, there was a possibility we could lose.
The other thing I wanted to bring up too, and I talked to you about it, Kevin, Technicomp is still actively selling and doing stuff. I drive by there almost every day, and many of you know that my daughter's got immunology issues. She just went through 2 major surgeries. We have my backyard floods. They fixed the front yard, thank God. But before Bob Wiley took over, and there was an interim drain commissioner, Ray Schweihofer, he came, our backyard, literally, I looked like I was on a moat. Before they dropped the overpass, the drain on the other side of the overpass was plugged, so everything on our side was flooding all of our yards terribly. I also had, before my loving neighbor that I love dearly moved in next door, the neighbor before built a pole barn. He had 2 huge double trains of dirt and sand brought in from most likely someone in the area, don't know for sure. Unfortunately, I can't check with him because he passed away. But all that stuff, they raised their level of the yard about 2 feet over mine. So guess where all the water goes? So.
And you think there's a reasonable likelihood there was contaminated
Yes.
fill involved in that?
So she had molecular studies done today to find out.
So the health risks from chronic ingestion of these levels of PFAS is real. There is a significantly increased risk. You're looking at an increased risk of 10, 20, 30%-ish with reasonable levels of exposure that you might encounter. But that's a pretty strong effect size in epidemiology. And across the country, there are many, many people who have various cancers, various immunological conditions, various forms of this metabolic syndrome, liver problems that are attributable to industrial exposures to PFAS. Now, in our community, given the numbers, let's suppose worst case scenario, and again, I don't expect this at all, and if I thought there was any reasonable likelihood of this, we would be telling you to drink bottled water right now. I think we're going to find that the well water is completely untouched, but we don't know for sure. But if we saw the same type of groundwater contamination that other areas see, that maybe aren't as blessed with the clay soil that we have here, so it does permeate down into the groundwater. You have a few hundred to a few thousand affected residents. How many people would become ill chronically as a result of that? How many conditions, how many cancers, liver conditions, immunologic conditions? In a population of thousands or tens of thousands, it may be a handful, I think. And I could probably get you better numbers at some point in the future. So it is possible in a community our size that we will know someone who is plausibly affected by this. But this is, I want to put this in proper perspective. This is not a strong enough effect that you would expect widespread, large numbers of health problems. But could there be someone in our community that's affected by a condition like this if there is significant groundwater contamination? It's possible. We can't rule it out, which means it's of concern to the community, right? Because someone we know and love might be affected by this.
The gentleman said that the cost was quite high, $60,000. I don't know.
Oh, to connect
to municipal water, and I did a quick search online. the state of Michigan, do they still have the PFAS contaminated wells program where they help folks connect to municipal water?
Ideally, yeah, so it's always the goal of DHHS is not to use filters for us, for eternity, is if there's either another source municipal to hook up to,
Yeah.
or if you can find a clean part of the aquifer that you could drill a clean well to, that is ideal, because as soon as you don't change that filter, you're not getting the protection anymore. So they don't like to keep people on filters, so in this case, if that gentleman's well that was in here was contaminated, they would pay for the hookup. It'd not be contaminated, but they do pay for hookups, and they get full lines run down. And it sounds like here, it's just that the water's there and it has to be connected. We have in areas funded hookups for people. Out in Grand Rapids, Wolverine paid for a lot of it. Wolverine that made the Hush Puppy shoes, they paid for a lot of the connections because they were found responsible. But in areas where we don't have a responsible party, yes, the state of Michigan has hooked up. Sometimes it takes, if the municipal line's not there, it takes a long time to get that water run. But
if
do
it
not like
is,
to keep people on filters forever, because they're paying for those filters to replace them, and then you gotta rely on people being diligent enough to change them out.
I've had my water tested before through the health department. I think it's like $25 or whatever it was.
Okay.
If I take a sample now and have it tested, will it be tested for PFAS?
Oh, so the routine well water testing that we perform is not for PFAS. The PFAS testing is much more expensive.
Okay.
It's a much more involved
So
process.
it won't show if I take it.
No. You're probably getting the E. coli test and a couple other things, metals. I know, yeah, when I bought my house with a well, that's general. And I get that a lot. People don't understand. I go up to knock on the door and say, you want well test for PFAS? Like, no, all right, well's already been tested. Well, you haven't been tested for PFAS, but it has been tested, but for other things.
I think a reasonable approach for now, I feel confident enough in EGLE's sampling strategy that if they can get sufficient numbers of residents willing to have their water tested according to the sampling plan that they've developed, if all of those test results come back nil or baseline, then I can be very confident in telling everyone, look, if you don't have the money and you don't want to test your well, it's almost certainly going to be safe. But I certainly understand if individual residents would still want to test their well water. But I think the combination of circumstances, the fact that EGLE has done so much testing in areas of surface contamination in the presence of the very thick clay heavy soils that we have here, and you've had zero detects so far throughout the entire county.
And right now, like I said, from China Township all the way up to the northern part of the county, we've tested. Well, in different areas where you had sources, old landfills, Fort Gratiot landfill, we tested some wells where there isn't a lot around there, but tested some wells around Fort Gratiot landfill, tested areas up in north of Fort Gratiot because of the high biosolids that report from farm fields. We tested wells around these fields that we found in high levels of surface water around there too. So we've tested a lot of wells.
It's that clay heavy soil that we have here, which is the frustration of everyone when it rains. It's really serving a useful purpose here because it's essentially creating an impermeable surface.
They use it on landfill liners. You can plastic liner, clay. Clay is used as a liner system to keep contaminants from seeping out of landfills and stuff.
The current biosolids application, because it's still being applied for the city, is that tested for PFAS?
Yes.
Is it tested for the short chain?
It's tested for it's tested for about the 39, so it does have some short chain. It's 28. Okay, 28 compounds is tested for it, and then they look at FOS and FOA, and if it's 20 parts per billion below for either one of those, it's not a combined number, so it's either FOS or FOA below 20 parts per billion, they can apply it at the normal application rate. If it's up to 100, from 20 to 100, they have to reduce application rate, and if it's over 100, they have to take it off the landfill.
So any wastewater treatment plant that land applies in Michigan, they are required to sample for PFAS, inform the landowner, farmer of those results. Again, we're the biosolids applications that we are concerned about in the county were from the 80s. And
they weren't in this area.
And they weren't in this area that we know of. It's very lucky that the Port Huron wastewater treatment plant had records from the 80s of where they applied, because that was before EGLE managed that program. So we didn't have those records. And so the levels that we're seeing now in biosolids being applied are nowhere near the concentrations there. You know, I think our average is around 5 parts per billion for PFOS and PFOA, and that's amongst all the wastewater treatment plants that land applied. We have 400 some wastewater treatment plants in Michigan, only about, I want to say like 200 or so maybe land apply. So it's not everybody.
So the biosolids problem was much worse focally in certain parts of the county relative to what
because Downtown was, before they stepped in our wastewater treatment plant, their wastewater went to Fort Huron. Then they set up, about 1990.
Yeah,
they set
right.
up their own treatment plant.
Right, so then they had a direct discharge permit that we permitted from EGLE to surface water.
And the issue of biosolids and PFOS and biosolids is something that we've discussed at the health department. I've suggested this may be an area ripe for consideration of local regulations. There's been interest at the Board of Commissioners level in addressing the PFOS issue. We would ideally like to keep the thumb as free as possible from PFOS contamination on our fields. We have wonderful agricultural land here. We're trying to protect it with our solar regulations, and the last thing we want is to protect our pristine agricultural land from solar fields only to have it ruined by widespread PFOS application. So it is something we're going to look into. And if I had my preference, we would stop the process. But many farmers say they need the biosolids as an affordable source of fertilizer, and
right.
their operations wouldn't be cost effective without it.
The alternative is other chemicals.
Yes, chemical fertilizer.
It's chemical fertilizer, and that is costly, and what's in that?
I got one thing, sir.
Yes, of course.
Going back at the end of Petite Street, there used to be a dump.
Can you orient me? Where is that?
I can't see your map.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, can I turn this and then I can just have you guide my finger
You
here?
go down 24th Street under the railroad.
Oh,
Under the
so is it this area here?
It's over here somewhere, maybe.
Oh, over here maybe, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so this area here.
Yep. And that was before Smith's Creek. That was the dump for the whole area. I mean, everybody, industrial.
Oh, it was, okay.
Municipalities,
I'd
everybody.
love to look. We have a pretty good record of those always we call them dumplings. The state has records of those because, a lot of communities just have their own little dump that people would just take anything to, and it wasn't lined. It usually was a former pit that was dug for the sand, and I thought it's filled with garbage now. So we might have that on our records, but
There are monitoring wells.
oh, is there? Then it is on our radar then. Then EGLE has looked at that.
How many car fires that would use AFFF foam would it take
to do this?
To do the high levels?
We thought about that. I had originally asked EGLE if this peak here was the result of maybe a large tractor trailer fire that they used aqueous firefighting foams to battle. And am I correct? My sense is EGLE doesn't think the firefighting operations
based
are
on the
responsible.
PFAS compound we're seeing, it doesn't indicate. Yeah. It would take multiple ones to get that. I don't know how you could even do that.
It's not pretty common for car fires.
No, it's mostly tanker, or sometimes they do it at garages if they're on fire, to put it out because of the gasoline and oil that can be in the garage.
But even a large scale conflagration here,
you would see it
that far.
you wouldn't see, you wouldn't see it up here.
Yeah, if the fire happened, you would just see it there, and maybe in those local ditches right there, but you wouldn't see it upgrading, meaning upstream of that possible.
Well, I have to say, I think this meeting has been very helpful, because what we've heard is that there appears to have been application during the correct periods of time that we would be anticipating this across a wide area, and it appears that this was in response to swampy areas that required some widespread degree of fill application over the appropriate time frame. But what the missing piece was the fill material that would have been plausibly used in these areas consistent with something we would expect to have PFAS contamination.
Yeah.
And that's what we're missing.
And we did talk to one, there is a company here in that area called the Seed Guy, I don't know if you've heard of him. We did talk to him because we found out from the drain commissioner about him, and I got his contact and called him. And he said, I asked him straight out if he'd gotten paper pulp from Damatar to use, and he said, no, he used all virgin pulp in
Don't
his.
be taking pitchforks to
Yeah.
to him.
No, he's not.
He's been cooperative.
Yeah, he's been cooperative, but he's probably not the only hydro seeder
Right.
in this area that would have possibly been, and maybe there's one that even now you're not in business anymore. So we did approach the one hydro seed company that's right in this area.
And I guess, I don't want to end on a downer, but we do have investigations across the state where we have levels like this, and we have been unable to find a source or sources. And so we just want to prepare that we may never know, but our primary responsibility is to protect public health and the environment. So that's why we will ensure that you're not drinking contaminated water and you're not eating contaminated fish. So you may not find the guy, the company, whatever that happened. And I know that is frustrating.
So how do you neutralize it?
So there's no technology right now where you can just like dump in something to clean it. It doesn't exist.
The ditch cleaning up is very difficult. Reverse osmosis and granulated activated carbon does take it out of water.
Right.
But these little ditches and stuff, nobody's built their technology that can filter it as it's passing by without it damming up and flooding fields. There's just no technology for surface water cleanup.
For surface water.
But there's a lot of people, a lot of universities studying it, and a lot of stuff coming out every day.
Yes.
So maybe there will be one day.
Well, now what this means for the foreseeable future is that fish from that pond will be off limits for years, probably decades.
And there's signage, so, yes, sir.
You keep mentioning the fish. Now, are you talking about fish out of these ponds or fish out of the St. Clair River or Lake Huron, Lake St. Clair?
So, again, I would encourage you to go online and Google, and we're talking, specific fish species in the certain water bodies, so here comes in pond, bluegill, sunfish. It's pretty much all species,
Shallow fish.
But out of the ponds, not the big water.
Bell River.
So we got Bell River, we've got the Black River.
And this is because of the more widespread lower level contamination.
Right, and so we're highlighting because PFAS is driving the fish consumption advisories. And so some of them are not, some are do not eat, some are just limiting your consumption. We've got the how drain, and here's the pine. And so you can see here the species out of the pine, whereas a blanket do not eat.
Yeah, I think the St. Clair River, I know that St. Clair was, that's been for years based on mercury and PCBs. I eat the walleye out of the St. Clair River.
What about the deer that drink?
Right.
Yeah, that's a valid question.
Yeah,
I don't know, but I would think that if the deer are drinking from the surface waters, which we would expect them to, that there would be PFAS bioaccumulating in the deer that you're hunting in this area. It's a valid point, and I don't think we've done any testing of deer, have we?
Well, let me back up. Okay. So the Clark's Marsh on the west side, there has been, DNR did issue advisories for the deer in that area. That's
Up by Escoto Smith Air Force Base.
right. So heavily impacted from nature bluff. So that has been something discussed within St. Clair County and working with DNR to do a wildlife study. So something we're looking at.
Yes.
So are you going to campaign and let the public know that resource is out there when you start doing that?
Mm-hmm. What was the result of Wordsmith? Was it do not eat or was it limit?
I think it.
The deer, I thought it was do not eat deer. That's the other one. There was another study done in Monroe. I don't know what came of that. Yeah, that one I don't even know.
But again, that our website.
Yes.
So just quick question on the deer. So was that based off of the water and just the precautions there, or did they actually test the deer?
They're not, we're supposed to the deer, that was meat tested.
Yeah.
That wasn't tested.
Yeah, because they were drinking the Clark's Marsh.
So you found it in the deer. It just wasn't precautionary because of the waters and stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is a valid concern. We are saying do not eat the fish because the fish are bioaccumulating the PFAS. They're drinking the contaminated water from the pond, and the PFAS is building up with every gulp the fish take. And if deer are consuming water contaminated at these levels consistently, and that is their primary source of water, then it's reasonable to anticipate that the deer would have levels similar to the fish over time. And I think PFAS would accumulate in the muscles and certainly the organs that some people might want.
Is there any DNR law against putting out water for the deer?
Put it out for the rabbits and the squirrels too, that everybody eats.
Yeah.
My
neighbor, yeah.
I'm under myself, that's a good one.
By the way, reverse osmosis systems for your home, I purchased two, because I like one better after I put the first one in. They're like $200 now to have a dedicated faucet for RO water. And the filters run about $80 every 6 months. So it's not a horrible cost
Now,
if
is
you
that
want
just one faucet?
one faucet, yeah.
And are those are commercial reverse osmosis units effective against most PFAS, including the filtering PFAS?
Yeah, and the MCAR website, and I'll give that information to Bob so he can post it. There are some really great resources about treatment and.
There's maps like these. We've taken a lot of surface water samples throughout the county. So there's the Black River has been sampled. Even though there's a fish advisor on that, when you actually look at the samples, the Black River is not that high, like single digits. Even though you got Stocks Creek, which is dumping in, you got Damatar paper sitting right on the river. Surprisingly, that river, it's a much bigger body of water. Was not that. There's not these.
And you'll likely see EGLE staff out in maybe August or September. We're going to do watershed sampling in the Bell and Pine River. You might see me out because we don't get to go outside very often. So whenever we have the opportunity to help our sampling teams. But then that will help inform a lot of the rest of our investigation in the county.
I really like EGLE. You know, a lot of the folks at the health department, the state health department, they mostly work from home in their pajamas, but the EGLE guys are out there every day getting muddy and dirty. You gotta respect it.
I wanted to talk to somebody from Demcar, and I texted my daughter because her husband works with them, and they all had to sign papers.
Interesting.
They can't talk to get their buyouts.
Like current employees or?
Well, they're working at another factory where my son-in-law works.
Wow.
And in order to get their buyouts, they had to sign.
Good old NDAs.
We got a guy that was fired from Downcar. Bomb's working on the contact info. So.
Okay. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's the way you
What
want.
about bathing in this water? I mean, you're saying drinking, cooking in it. What about bathing in it?
So my thoughts would be that would not be a significant risk. If someone were to dip into the pond, I wouldn't recommend it for other health reasons. But if someone were to dip themselves into the pond, I think the amount of transdermal exposure to PFAS would be minimal. The primary route of exposure that we're concerned about is ingestion. And not just, if you drink a cup of water out of the pond, your primary concern would be the bacteria and the parasites in the pond, right? The amount of PFAS that you would ingest would be trivial and it wouldn't significantly affect your serum levels. It's long-term consumption of contaminated groundwater, drinking water over time, which is the problem.
You're getting it in the consumer products. You're getting it in your everyday products, so you don't want to compound that with having it in your drinking water.
So where's your DVD bag?
Don't microwave popcorn.
Yeah, microwave popcorn, the bag,
Right.
Yeah.
So all those ads we saw in the 80s and 90s, better living through chemistry.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we're dealing
That was all
with the repercussions of
Yes.
this now. So we've taken a lot of time,
Yes.
and
We apologize.
your board has been very patient with us. Were there any additional questions from the trustees and the supervisors?
I've got cards, I'll leave them here. I'm probably going to take off, so you can continue your board meeting, but.
Thank you both very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, I'll call you tomorrow.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Information first. All right, let the team know we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Yes.
I'll be here. Same time. Yeah, thanks for getting everyone.
Thanks for your help.
See you next month.
Thank you.
You guys need one? Did you want one?
Thank you.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? All right, we'll continue the meeting. Moving on to item G, approve hiring Randy Fernandez as the new DDA director. The DDA board met with him Thursday and unanimously agreed to bring him on board. He's got the credentials and he's already coming up with ideas, so I would like to give it a try. Like he said, if it doesn't work out, no harm, no foul, but he would like to give it a shot. Motion by Dudash, support by Reno. Is there any discussion?
I met with him out in the parking lot after that meeting. I was talking with him. At first I was not, I was a little hesitant because I knew his affiliation with the EDA, I'm not fond of that. But he assured me that he's gonna be done with the EDA, September 1st, and he had a lot of good ideas as far as what he wanted to do for the township. And it was more, like farm markets, things that we could appreciate living here, maybe to bring people into our township, because people don't come to Port Huron Township for fun things to do, it's a drive-through township. So he had some ideas, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that his ideas weren't industrial, on what we're going through right now, with this PFAS thing. So I was pleasantly surprised. So I wasn't going to support him, but I will now.
I can speak highly of him. I've known him probably most of my life. He grew up on Henry Street.
Yep, right up the street.
Yeah. So, he's a township resident of Bridgewood. He's a good guy.
Roll call by the clerk, please.
Dudash?
Yes.
Reno?
Yes.
Bob? Yes. Shonka?
Yes.
Davis? Yes. Lopez?
Yes. Item H, approve work orders from the road commission. Should have got those today. One is a tree that needs to be removed on Peck Road, and then the other is ditching from Beach Road, 1,200 feet to the east on the south side. Pardon me? Yes. I'd like to make a motion to approve the work orders as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Reno, second by Dudash. Is there any discussion?
Which tree is it?
It's the dead one on Peck, about 3 doors down.
Oh, okay.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item I, FOIA appeal from Michelle Brown. Michelle, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I just have something that I wrote up. I'm here basically to formally challenge the fees and the completeness of the FOIA response I received from Port Huron Township. As a resident committed to transparency and responsible use of public funds, I raised the following concerns with the FOIA that we're talking about. First, I was not given an opportunity to amend or narrow the scope of my request before being charged increased fees. I was initially quoted between $25 and $40, yet I was ultimately billed $70.45. I believe this is a violation of MCL 15.234 Section 4, which requires advance notice and opportunity to revise when estimated costs exceed $50. Second, the response included analytical and cross-referencing tasks I did not request. Under Michigan FOIA law, public bodies are not required to create new records, perform analysis, or restructure information unless explicitly instructed. I did not instruct this in my FOIA. These unrequested tasks, I believe, inflated costs for my FOIA and delayed the response unnecessarily. Third, the documentation provided for the expense reimbursements were incomplete. I received in-house handwritten check request slips instead of original receipts. I specifically requested this. Several documents appeared cut off. If original receipts were used to justify the reimbursements, then they are public records under MCL 15.232 Section H. And this should have been disclosed. If they no longer exist, a written certification should have been issued per MCL 15.235 Section 4. Fourth, I was billed 2.5 hours of labor, much of which appears to stem from poor internal record keeping and the lack of digital formats. Of the 88 pages produced, 30 appear to be downloadable reports that likely existed in digital format prior to my request. These reports were run in June of 2025 and then printed, incurring additional fees. If these records were already available digitally, I question why the less economical option was chosen. FOIA fees must reflect the time required to locate existing records, not to compensate for organizational insufficiencies. Additionally, the monthly balance sheet by fund, that's supposed to be done monthly, is a financial report that should be readily available. So I don't know why there was a lot of digging taking place when all of this should have been in a monthly folder of some sorts. There is no justifiable reason for delay or excessive labor charges in accessing such a standard document or documents. And then I felt like there was some charges that lacked proper itemization. I had multiple line items in my FOIA request, 6, I believe, and there wasn't a time structure taken for each line item. So this FOIA, in my opinion, has exposed broader concerns about how records are maintained, how costs are calculated, and how transparency is upheld. And that's what I want to say. And I would hope that you guys would at least go ahead with the lower threshold of the first estimate of $20 was $20. She said 25 to 40. I'd be willing to pay the 25.
So you had my response or my breakdown of time that was requested or is attached to the appeal. The FOIA coordinator has the option of extending the time for 10 days if necessary to compile a response to the FOIA, which I did. I did not see where I am required to provide an estimate, but I did provide an estimate when I responded with the extension. It was a poor estimate, apparently, and I did apologize for that, but the documents that she requested in her FOIA were compiled and provided. And like I show in the breakdown, it shows the time spent, and we can bill for the lowest qualified person to be able to do that task. And we have always practiced historically just to bill at minimum wage plus benefits. So it it's $18.47 per hour, which is not the wage for myself, who it was the one that compiled that data. I spent 3.5 hours on the request. It was multiple. I did not do any statistical documents that weren't asked for. That was for my benefit only. And I don't feel that it was, the fee was in excess for what was asked for. And I don't know if there's any other questions.
Any comments?
I reviewed the FOIA, I reviewed the calculations and the reports that were given, and I didn't see any problems with them.
Okay. The board has a few options here, either to waive the fee, reduce the fee, or uphold the fee.
I guess my question is, when did we know that the cost was more than the estimate?
When I was done with it.
When you got done with it? So, did you give an opportunity if they wanna not take it, or once it's done, I don't know the rules, I guess is what I'm asking.
You mean if they request it,
Like, okay,
and they realize, oh, I don't wanna spend that much, I don't want it.
Right.
So historically, in the past, we've provided the documentation and then a bill with the documentation. If you do not pay for a bill, then we have the right to not provide it or ask for a deposit. We haven't in the past taken deposits because it's just a lot of going back and forth and keeping track of everything. But this was probably one of the last ones that I've done where I haven't had them pay up front. They want the information. So if I do them now, I send them the bill and say, this is how much it is. When you pay the bill, I'll send the information.
Okay, so we've already provided the information?
Yeah, the reports were provided.
She also provided an estimate that I asked for in my original FOIA. I asked for an estimate, so she knew I was looking for a gauge of the fee. And she estimated that to be between $25 and $40. And she never came back to ask if I wanted to make changes to my FOIA to possibly reduce the cost.
You didn't ask for me to give you an estimate in this FOIA.
Regardless, you gave me an estimate, Benita.
I know I did, but you didn't ask for one in
Yeah,
this FOIA.
and it was like huge after that.
I guess under lessons learned going forward, you don't provide it until it's settled, whether they want it or not. I guess that's not the question we need to deal with this particular. So, you said you provided an estimate from 25 to 40, is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
And it ended up being 70?
A lot of this information should be public anyway. We should know
Yes.
half of this.
That's not what FOIA is.
No, but
It's
that's what
asking for a
government
document.
transparency is.
But it's asking for a document, and that's what you asked
But
for.
we have to pay for everything that we want to know about. You guys don't give it to us freely.
It cost us to look this stuff up.
It's not difficult to publish what you have in your paperwork that you're approving every board meeting.
You asked for every board that we have from 2023 to present.
You should have monthly records of that as a clerk.
It's not a punch of a button to get all of that information.
Well, maybe it should be.
It's not, but that, it doesn't matter how we do things.
Oh, okay.
Listening to everything that everybody's saying, I make a motion that we leave it at the billing for the $70.
You want to uphold the fee?
Yes.
A motion by Reno to uphold the fee. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Shanka. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to see it, between the, between 20 and 40, I would just like to see it at the, at 40, within the estimate that she was given.
Is there any other discussion?
I agree.
Yeah, I second on 40 since it was the high of the estimate.
Well, I got a motion and support on the floor. Roll call by the clerk, please.
Reno,
Yes.
Shanka,
Yes.
Dudash,
No,
Falk,
No.
Davis, yes, Lewandowski.
Yes. Next is FOIA appeal from Carol Miller. Carol?
I was gonna read a thing on responsibilities of the clerk's position, but because the meeting has run so long, I'll just get to the chase. I'm gonna read the email that I don't know if you all have the attachment to, the email trail. This is dated June 19th, 2025, and just so everybody that's here knows what I was FOIAing. The DDA, I wasn't privy to any financials, which Michelle is correct. To be transparent, what you have in your agenda packet should be made public to us. So I asked for financials due to the fact that your master plan for sidewalks for the DDA from 2013 still wasn't completed to the date, and I wanted to see how much in debt we were. So I FOIA 2024's DDA financials, which is the general ledger, which Benita is responsible for. I then took, and after getting that, which I did get an email back, I was not charged for that. The email I received back did show some inconsistencies that raised my awareness. So I then went back and asked for the 4 years before that to see if there was a pattern. So my email starts on June 18th, that I had asked for the FOIA. Benita replied, because some of the information that you requested in these two FOIA's requests listed above on June 2nd cross over, I combined them for purposes of getting you the information requested with duplicating the items. You'll find the PDF for each year 20, 21, 22, and 23, which includes all revenue expenditures, which is basically the general ledger, within the DDA account, as well as a detailed expense report. There is a check register for the payroll for any DDA director during those years. I'm not sure what you mean when you refer to other. All I could find is the payroll register. There is a column for other pays, which is used for other things set up in the payroll system, such as sick time, vacation. The DDA director does get an additional authorized PHN or phone stipend monthly for $35. In your request, you indicated that you wanted copies of records, call logs, documentation detailing payments included above, expenditures, emails, and memos submitted with regard to any on-call status. I did not find any records that pertain to this or reference this term. I did include the DDA director job description, although it doesn't reference this either. I have included the invoice for the FOIA. Please submit, blah, blah, blah. If you have any questions, please contact me. So I replied back, pardon me, too many papers. Put good morning, Benita. In response to your reply of my email, I am again noting that your documentation of obtaining the FOIA request records is incorrect. Again, as stated in my reply, you stated in a previous email of getting the same requested material, and this is a quote from the original FOIA that I did. Because this information was readily available through our accounting reports and there was minimal staff time, there is not a cost associated with these requests at this time. Also, as previously noted, on the things she did send me, she must have printed them off because there's a printed date and time stamp on the 4 years of the general ledger. The time date stamp for 2020 document was June 17th at 15:09 p.m. For 2021, 6/17 at 15:09 p.m., same time. For 2022, it was 4 minutes earlier at 15:05. For 2023, it was 2 minutes earlier at 15:03. This indicates a total time of 7 minutes to view and to save as a document. Since this is the lower end of 15 minutes per state guidelines, this is to be rounded down, so hence 0 time. I did not ask for copies, but an electronic copy. There should have been no copies made to have a duplicate, scan, or print. If you do not know how to save an electronic accounting document, I'll be more than happy to come to show you how easily and quickly it can be done. Also, as you previously stated, and I quote, I did see that in the 1 hour of time that I billed for labor copy duplication should not have been billed on that line. Accuracy and documentation of an elected township clerk should be paramount. In that you made this mistake, I should not be billed in another area to make up for this mistake. I also noted that you did give me meeting minutes to indicate the cell phone payout for the DDA was given to promote convenience for the official, which I appreciate. I assume this document was not included in your documentation of time. In summary, I believe the time to factor in what report you knew exactly where to find, save to a document file, and attach documents to an email is minimal, as shown above. It also is nonsensical to have asked for an extension of 10 days' time to obtain this request. If need be, I will be happy to ask for time on the agenda to review and present the Freedom of Information Act request, and it goes on. So what I'm looking at is on the cost sheet, on section 1, labor costs for copying and duplication, it says hourly wage charge, $12.48, or hourly wage with fringe benefit cost, which is $18.47. So she has a choice of either charging us $12.48 or $18.47. What she did is she cost me, and I find it ironic that Michelle's FOIA request took the same exact time mine did, of 2.5 hours, when in the previous FOIA request she said it was minimal time and no cost. The general ledger is what she is responsible for. She should have immediate electronic availability to the general ledger. You open an email, you attach the document, you send it. It's not hard. It doesn't take 2.5 hours to do that. So in essence, she's charging me almost $47 for this FOIA, which should have been under 15 minutes. So I'm asking, especially when I caught the error on her billing, I shouldn't be charged for her error. So that's why I'm appealing this. I think it's wrong, and I think she's taking and charging for things that she didn't do. Thank you.
So again, you have the breakdown of my time on each of those 2 FOIAs. The 1 hour reference in the billing was just that I put it under copying, and I didn't spend time copying. It should have went under the labor to examine and review. So as you can see, I broke it down. So reviewed the FOIA to reference what other was referring to. Had to pull the previous FOIA, go through the report to find out if I could find the other pay code that indicates phone, PHN. So there was time allotted for that. Some of the reports printed, 7 minutes. The expense distribution reports, that's a report that has to all be set up. There's 16 different fields that you must set up to show how you want it to come out to be printed. That was done, I think, at minimal time there. There was time, the payroll, I had went into the payroll system to print different reports there regarding the two different time frames and the two different directors. There was other amounts charged in salaries. I went through to review to see what other salaries were charged. That was through the DPW when they do banners. She asked for mileage reimbursements, any other allowances. That's through the AP system, so I went through to research any disbursement checks that had been issued. So there was 1 hour or 65 minutes spent on the number 2 FOIA request. The number 3 FOIA request, which I didn't duplicate the years of financials asked for, but because we don't have a DDA director at this time, and it's not something I could forward, the things that were asked for were payments, expenditures, emails, memos, call logs with regard to the on-call status of the DDA. So as you can see on that FOIA, the supervisor and treasurer went through their emails to see if anything fell within those parameters. Very minimal time was spent there. And then I also had to go over to the storage facility because as the DDA director's office was cleaned out, things were put into storage, went through the file boxes over there, and some are still here. So that was my time spent on that.
So what I received was a copy of the general ledger and then a summary of the general ledger. That was all I received, plus the copy of the meeting minutes for the stipend of the cell phone for the DDA director. There were no call logs because the township cell phone was given up, and that's the only way you can look at logs of incoming and outgoing calls, and there was no log made to be kept by the person using their personal cell phone. So there's no logs there. That should have been, excuse me, that should have been taken care of and known, so you shouldn't have had to go through that. Your general ledger should be on a document on your computer because by state mandate, you are supposed to be responsible for that. Prepared financial reports for the township board, at least monthly balance sheets by fund, best practice for Michigan Treasury, APM, at least a monthly check report, at least quarterly revenue. It goes on and on and on. So those documents should have been on an electronic form. There was no need for copying and printing. And obviously with a time, date, and stamp of 7 minutes time of what you gave me does not take 15 business days to do. I'm really sorry, but to take and charge somebody that amount of money for a thing that you sent me an email on 4/25 FOIA request saying that if I have any concerns, blah, 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 give me a call if I can find a report that's more suitable. Because this information was readily available through our accounting reports, and these with minimal staff time, there is not a cost associated. But then all of a sudden, it goes from $0 to almost $50. I find that unbelievable.
You
That
didn't
it
ask
took.
for the same thing.
I asked for the same thing. I got the same exact report. And to take and click on a report, to click, I want memos, I want this. Benita, I've been in business. I've had a business degree for many, many, many years. I know how the financials work. There's no way that this took over 2.5 hours to do. There's no way. Then you must have a problem with waste.
All right. So boards, either we waive the fee, reduce the fee, or uphold the fee. What's the board's discretion?
I'll make a motion, we uphold the fee.
A motion by Reno, is there support?
Support.
Support by Shonka. Is there any discussion?
The fee was how much?
$46.18.
Any other discussion?
There was no estimate before, correct, no estimate?
I was not provided an estimate. All I was what I went through before with the first FOIA, saying it was minimal time, and then she had her error that I caught on the billing. And I'm being penalized for that.
Roll call by the clerk, please.
Reno,
Yes.
Shonka,
Yes.
Dudash,
Yes.
Falk. Davis, yes, Lewandowski.
Yes. Approval of bills?
Make a motion, we approve the prepaid bills in the amount of $312,970.09.
A motion by Shonka, is there support? Support by Davis. Is there any discussion regarding the prepaid? Seeing none, roll call by the clerk.
Shonka,
Yes.
Davis, yes. Falk,
Yes.
Reno,
Yes.
Dudash,
Yes.
Lewandowski.
Yes.
Make a motion, we approve the current bills in the amount of $372,941.64.
Motion by Shonka, is there support? Support by Reno. Is there any discussion regarding the current bills? Seeing none, roll call by the clerk.
Shonka,
Yes.
Reno,
Yes.
Dudash,
Yes.
Falk,
Yes.
Davis, yes, Lewandowski.
Yes. Board correspondence. Anybody have anything?
Some updates from SEMCOG, on here. Talked to you about in the office, about those 911 signs along the river. If you get into trouble, we're at Black River, we're doing kayak launches, that sort of thing. If you launch and you have a problem, you gotta dial it. It's not like you buy a mailbox. They now have a sign, in fact, it's been out since 2000, I think it's 11. It's blue and white, you mount along the riverbank, and it gives 8 numbers on it. Tell the 911 operator, this is the number. It tells her within 30 feet of where you are. I'm kind of pushing it down at SIMCOG. Whenever we do a pathway or put money in for a kayak launch or boat launch, that area, we should probably put that in the tap. That should be part of the funding for these signs. Just so you know, they're about the size of this. No parking in this area. The zone goes on the riverbank. They're white and blue, very noticeable. Bob asked me to ask if there was any funding for auditor separation, right, on 24th Street.
Water mains?
Yeah, I told Kevin, and funds are short, but he's just getting an application in. Best we can do, and then when we look at it, see if we got money. I mean, we had 39 projects approved. We had like lost 54, I think, was asked for, and it just wasn't $2.3 billion. Our census still keeps coming back, and we're losing people in our area. Huron Township's losing more than most, and KeyPack is growing.
We've gained them most in the last 20 years.
But that's the retail's going down everywhere. And we did talk about, I went to Wayne County's federal, and I got into a big discussion like we did today on Wayne County. They're putting in GSIs in every retention pond because of it down in Wayne County. Like you were saying, the paths down there terribly. You can't go anywhere. Nobody drinks well water, I don't think, in county because of it. And every pond, every dredge pond, everything got a GSI. if it's a parking lot, you have to adjust that parking lot so the stormwater doesn't get into the drain system if it overflows from heavy rain.
Is that it?
I think so, yes, sir.
Okay. I got a couple, well, as you've seen in your packet, the city raised water rates astronomically. Also, water and sewer extensions. We have someone that's gonna be building some homes on the end of App Avenue. The sewer's there, but the water doesn't quite, it's, I don't know, Mike, do you, well, 3 or 4 homes short?
300 feet or less, something like that.
The builder informed me that he wanted to put in wells for these places, and I said, man, it would be worth it to put water in, because that would be a huge selling point. And that was before I knew about the PFAS stuff. And so I was talking to him, and I really want to sell him water too. You know, the more customers we have, try to keep prices down. But what's the thought? Only on existing roads. If someone builds a new subdivision or a new road, that's on them. But for existing roads where the water or sewer isn't there, what's the thoughts of the township covering engineering and permitting? Like for that, was it 300 feet? I think you estimated engineering and permit fees probably around $4,500. And then the builder would be responsible for the actual installation of the main.
I know in the past when they wanted to do that, like the main equipment, vacant lots past the water, they would have to pay for it to go to the other end of the property. So like if the next person wanted it, they could do it. And
That's probably in your ordinances but I don't know if that just applies to developments or.
This was an existing road where.
Yeah.
I think it was over on Mark, off of Michigan there. Like, the water main went to the last house that was there, and then somebody bought a lot, and they wanted water, and that was fine. The only thing I don't know is if we paid for like the engineering, but I know that they had to pay to get the water, not just to their house, but all the way past their house to the next person.
Like to the edge of the property line?
Right.
Okay.
They had to take it across the whole front of their house to the next, to their property.
Right.
So that the next, if somebody bought the next property, they'd have to do the same thing. But it wasn't, it was 100 feet, but again, I don't know whether the township.
When a new development comes in, you wouldn't wanna let them not extend across their frontage, cause then somebody else is gonna have to put it across frontage that's not theirs,
So
right?
you have to dig up the.
But I think you're talking about,
existing house.
you're not talking about like development, you're just talking about building out parcels on
Build
roads.
on existing parcels or
Yeah.
on existing roads that are already there.
Right. Are you suggesting that builder paying for this is a condition of issuing permits, or if they wanna do it, then this would be the deal you'd strike?
If they would do it,
I would have a little bit of concern about the other stuff.
if they would do it, we would be covering engineering and permitting, and he would do be responsible for the install.
I don't know what other option we had.
Pay for engineering and permitting himself?
That's, I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that for all 3 houses, or is it just for that $45?
I'm just talking for anything from here on out. For these 3 houses here, it's $4,500
Yes, for the
estimated
extension.
for an extension to cover all three.
That's not like.
No,
We'd have to go out and survey the property and get plans into EGLE, and they want a hydraulic analysis and the permit and all that, so.
I would think that they should also.
that's all I'm asking.
Yeah. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but that's.
My situations.
It's one of them things, I get it. Installing water mains, that's the expensive, that's the biggest expense. But if we want some growth on existing roads, we're gonna have to do something. Like I said, if it's a brand new sub and someone's putting in new roads, the whole thing's on them, because they're gonna have to design the whole works.
This would be just for not having anything.
Nope, I would say from here on out, we gotta keep it consistent.
It's just whatever you do, you gotta, I don't know, would you consider doing it on a special assessment basis?
Well, we probably could. But the special assessments have to be paid for before the house can be sold.
Yes. I think they do, I don't know the rules.
So we wouldn't want to do that. Any thoughts on that, Vic?
I make a motion. Those would have to make consistent throughout the township.
Yeah, we'd have to do it from here on out.
Right. So we're saying $1,500 a lot, or we have to look at it based on where it's.
Each-
But we're 90 foot,
Each case
each case,
would be different depending on,
footage.
you know,
Depends on how far you got running, I mean, you know.
Right.
In this case, I think the water line's up to the property now, is that correct?
I think they want to build like 6 houses, and I think it's already across like 3 of them. He was talking, I'll probably just put in a well for the other 3. I go, a well's not a good selling point. Well, it wouldn't be for me.
I think there's something in the ordinance that the water's so many feet where they gotta hook up to.
Oh, there isn't.
No?
Sewer, there is, okay.
Just a thought, if it's proximate to that area, that sounds feasible, but if it's a huge expense to get it there, and you're.
No, it's already got to be brought to, it's already
To the property line?
to the property. You know, there's,
Okay. Rather than making a motion at this point, you might wanna work out the terms of this policy.
right. I'm trying to get, before I do anything,
I know.
Just get feedback.
Mr. Dudash made a motion, I just wanted to make sure that we,
Rescind it.
there we go.
I think it might be an incentive for other people, even if it's not that much money, but it might give them, say, hey, when you get the engineering done, and I can just lay the pipe and hook up to the lines. It might
You know,
be
there's still
simple.
got to be a contractor that's sure to do it.
I guess one thought of it, if we did the engineering, should we require them to use our engineering firm?
Oh, yeah, if we're paying for it, we're
No,
going to dictate.
If they do it, there's no requirement for
There's
them
no
to use.
requirement. If they're
We
paying
would,
for
we
it.
would review at that point and help you
We're looking
submit.
out for our interests, I guess, if we're, how do you determine whether the water line's big enough to
Yeah,
take care of it?
in that scenario, we would review their plans and facilitate the permit submittal to EGLE.
Yeah, EGLE will tell you if it's big enough or not, but DLC would know the difference. Matter of fact, you can't put in an
think it's 8 to 6. I don't
It
know.
isn't, so you have to hook 8 to a 6, but it's still gonna be, right, Mike?
Yeah, you can't put in less than a 8-inch for public water main.
All right, I'll look into it.
I think they, Pete said.
If we're paying the engineering, it's gonna be then.
I understand,
And
I'm just
permit.
looking at it, if we made them do it, they don't, do they have,
No.
require them to do it?
DLT would just review the plans.
Know if you got enough stuff, put something together, or?
We'll give it a shot. Anyone else have anything under board correspondence?
I got one thing, I'd like to see us consider having more time on code enforcement. Just driving here tonight, there's 4 trailers sitting up at the house, a boat in the parking lot. And then, I know that when somebody's evicted, the owner or the landlord can put the top of the curb.
Well, they're not supposed to.
Well, I don't know, but that looks.
You talking about Westwater?
Yeah, that's what.
Is it
looks
still
like.
there today?
Yeah.
Okay, because we were told it was gonna get picked up last Friday. So, we'll check into it.
Okay. That's, I mean, like.
It's not like we're not,
No, I understand, okay, but I mean, there's. You know, I'm not looking for them, but they're pretty obvious when we're driving by, I know that we don't. Like, if people complain, you gotta do it, but I think another.
we go beyond just complaints.
Yeah, well, I think we should consider having some kind of an anonymous thing to complain. I know that today, things are different with neighbors. They don't talk to each other, and sometimes you don't want to, and if you find out that it was you that did it, then there's repercussions. It's just different out there today than it used to be. So, I mean, I just don't wanna see our township turn into the dump. So, I mean, if we have to authorize more time to do that, I'd be for that, I guess, but I'm not saying that we're not doing anything now, but if we need more time, I think we need to consider that.
And Bob can attest that we're,
Yeah, so John, there's, Ted and I talk occasionally, he leans on people, gets them to comply, and then he runs into people who just either stonewall them or tell them yeah, and then don't do it, and we've got I think there's a group of 5, and he mentioned another one just before he went on leave, that he wants us to start some court action on. And so as soon as he's back, we're gonna do that. On those 6 really problem properties, one of them I think warrants a nuisance abatement action in the circuit court. The rest I think we can do through formal hearings in the district court. We had problems at one time getting the district court judges to do actual enforcement. They assess a fine, but then we'd have a hard time getting them to say, you have to clean it up, which they do have the power to do, but they were telling us at one point they didn't. We've had some mixed success there, and so we want to go back and do it again, with us initiating the formal hearing rather than doing it through the magistrate. I think that will get us in front of the judge to get some quicker response. So those real problem properties where they're just not responding are being targeted. And if anyone knows of any more, I'm sure Ted would.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's, like, a lot of this, if you just send them a letter that you can't do what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then there's no action.
Yeah.
And you can.
there's a lot of that.
A lot of letters, and then a lot of notices, and then if the people comply, then it's, I can't talk about the boats and trailers and things like that. I don't know that piece of the puzzle. must get resolved otherwise, but the actual blight, those do come before me if they're a problem.
Right now, boats are kind of a problem because
Seasonal.
it's a seasonal thing that they're using them. They come and go, and they're allowed to be there for so many days before.
We had that once with campers where people were putting their camper in their front yard, and then they were moving it out on the street for a couple hours, and they bring it back in the driveway. And I'm technically in compliance with the statute, the ordinance is requiring that. So, those things don't go unnoticed. From my perspective, I can tell that they don't go unnoticed.
So then again, I'll tell Ted he can work as much as he wants when he gets back. I don't have a problem with it.
I just think like, I don't know what he does. I mean, I know what he does. Maybe he's already impressed some of these things. And they're not gonna go in like you think.
Yeah, so generally the process is if he sees it, he either talks to him or sends him a letter. That doesn't get an issue, I believe he issues an actual notice of violation, in which case they have a certain period of time within which they have to fix the violation. That doesn't get fixed, then he issues a ticket. And that usually ends up either paid and resolved, or before a magistrate for an informal hearing, which often gives the pressure necessary to get the thing done. Or the person asks for a formal hearing. Rarely do we jump in and initiate a formal hearing right out of the gates. That's the approach we're gonna be following with these 5 particular properties. And so,
Problem even with the magistrate is he'll take them to the magistrate, and the people don't show up.
yeah.
And they don't do anything
That
about
is
it.
a problem. And the magistrate doesn't have the authority to issue injunctive type directives, but the district court judge does, so we'll be using that. And then we can file a motion for order to show cause whether it should be held in contempt, and sometimes that gets their attention. And I'm not opposed to sending out, asking the judge to send out the bailiff to pick them up on a bench warrant if they fail to pay. I mean, once we're at that level and they're completely thumbing their nose at Ted, at the township, at the court, the judge generally will get ticked.
Fortunately, a lot of times it gets to be a long process. That just, it irks me too.
And then like, how many of these have already addressed this? And drive by it every day and see them there. With everybody else even there, what they must not do anything, so they put theirs there. They always got a whole.
You talking about campers and boats?
Yep. And then there's a whole bunch of people that follow the rules and don't want to have their house where they're supposed to. And then they look and say, well,
Mine's back beside the house. Dawn's is back.
Yeah, yeah, way back.
that's what I mean, but I mean, it's like, they drive by and look, I went through and made a special driveway, put my camper alongside the house. This guy parks up front, they don't do nothing. That's how I look at it, and people look at it like that.
How many cars can be every year?
16. 16? No, I don't. Long as their license has been sure.
Strawberry Lane?
Strawberry Lane's got a lot, and he's checked them before, and they've been licensed.
That cobblestone house.
Yep.
Okay.
It looks like he's getting another accumulation that, I'll send him back out and double check what he's got now.
That's all I got.
Thank you, sir.
Let's say, thank you to Dr. Nevin. And EGLE was very informative, the presentation was today. Spent a lot of time with this. So
Get the
it's good.
experts in here that
Yeah,
handle it and give us an update of what's going on.
we appreciate it.
Like I said, the hard part's finding where is it? Nothing's registering for the past 50 years. There's been neighborhoods. All right, motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
Motion by Falk, support by Kudash. All in favor?